we are talking about the selection tool. Now, with this tool, we all know what it does. It's very straightforward. It moves things around. Yeah. You use it to select stuff. Yes. But there's more to it than that. It allows you to do more. There's more to it than just selecting an object and being able to move it around. The way they have Illustrator with the binding box and all those fancy little things allows you to do quite a bit with it. That you probably don't think of on a daily basis. So, as you see, simple, just click and select. Click away from something, drag. You can draw a box around what you need to select. Alright, or unclick that. Or you can do the same thing, draw a box, but it doesn't need to go all the way over everything like it does in certain programs like what is that one? CorelDRAW. You can actually go over part of an object and it will select it. So, now with that said, let's get into the nitty-gritty. Now I'm going to start by selecting, I know, shocking, one of these objects. Now let's take a good look at this object here. What do we see? Well, we see that it looks more than what it appears. But reality is this is just a cube, just a square, nothing more than that. I know it looks a lot more complex than that, but it is. It's literally just a cube. So if I go over here and hover over this little inside corner dot, I can click on that holding down and then carrying it out, and I've got my cube, my square back. Now in here you have the Rescaling Corner. As you can see, the icon changes to a double arrow pointing at a 45-degree angle. That allows me to change the size, obviously. Now if I hover a little bit away from there, we get the double arrow again, but we get it pointing at 90-degree angles from each other. This is obviously an indication that you can rotate the object. So, hence, now if I hold down the Shift key, depending on what degree that it's set at in your preferences, I believe it's your preferences, yeah, you can do, in my case, it restrains it to 45 degrees, which is quite convenient when you're trying to do certain things. You can adjust that to 10, 15, 20, whatever you need it to be, but that's what it's there for. Now, let's again go back to our cornering. There's a little bit more to it than just making a round corner. Yeah, that's what it does, but aside from the selection tool and being able to hit the letter V to select it, we have a little bit more to it. Now, if I have an object selected, as long as I'm with that, using that selection tool, I can hit the Enter or Return key. It'll bring up this lovely Move dialog box, which allows me to move the object in a specified increment or angle. So let's see. We're going to move this horizontally 3 inches. No, it's just 1 inch, let's say. We're going to move it vertically -0.5, and then I'm thinking, well, if I start messing around with the distance, that's going to change the other numbers, so we're not going to touch that. We are going to set an angle. Let's do 30. I like 30. 30 sounds good. Now, as we progress down towards the bottom of this box, we can preview those changes, and as you see, it really didn't do. It moved our box. I don't know why it's not showing an angle, but Oh, duh. I knew that. This is the angle that you're moving in. So, as you can see, it changed my location. So if I set that to 1, I know I had that 1, it'll move my location based off of that. If the angle and the distance here are independent of the specific horizontal and vertical value. So you can set in a distance, say, oh, I don't know, well, let's do 2. Now it's going to move 2 at a negative 45. Now, as we progress down, as you can see, we have transform options, which are not being allowed because of the things that we're currently doing. And then, as you see, we have preview. So you have a good indication of what you're doing and where it's going. Then after preview, we got copy, cancel, or OK. OK will just move it. Cancel it will obviously do what it does. Cancel does, and it won't do anything. And if I hit copy, and make a duplicate of that. All right. I'm going to have to take 2 seconds out. I'm sorry. Okay. Now that we've covered the move tool, that's part of the... Oh, speaking of the move tool, another way, other than hitting the enter or return key, there's another way of getting to it. Obviously, you can go up here and fish around in the menu or type it and go, oh, move tool, and move, and you'll find it right there under the object, whatever. Aside from that, you can just double click on, well, you have to have something selected first, and then you can just double click on it on the selection tool. Yeah, this is not going as well as planned. Let's try this again. 1, 2, 1, 2, and start over. Alright, sorry about that. I got distracted. Now that we are almost done talking about the move tool, there's one little more thing that I want to mention about it, and then we'll move on to the transform box, which is all connected with the selection tool, which is all about moving things around, scaling, and making minor adjustments. So, the other thing that I want to mention is that if you have one object selected, or 2 or 3, whatever, if you have something selected, you can go up to the selection tool icon on the up here, and just double click, and then that'll bring up the move tool. We'll hit escape to get out of that, and now let's move on to the next thing I want to talk about, and that's our transform box. Now, you wouldn't have this in any really in let me rephrase it. You would have a transform box tab, but it looks a little bit different than earlier versions, because earlier versions of up until before CC did not have this section here. Previous versions only had this part up here, and I believe they also had the scaling checkboxes, if I recall right. Anyways, we're talking about, so whatever. Let's get into this. It's pretty straightforward, pretty easy to understand. You have your X and Y coordinates. Where is it located on your pasteboard? Where? So then, along with that, you have your W and your H, which is your width and your height. How big is your object? So that is selection. Or how big is your selection? So as you can see now that I have 2 objects selected, it's larger here. The numbers are bigger. Along with that. Now, in addition to that, you can skew your objects. So say I wanted to skew it a little bit. No problem. And you can set an angle to your objects as well. Now it changes it from a cube to an object. So it's known, if you're in this particular case, because I was working with a cube. So because I distorted it to the point where it is no longer considered a square or a rectangle, that in Illustrator terms, that I do not have the option of applying the curves anymore. Now, yes, you can do curves on various angled objects and things like that. For example, let's see, let me draw another box here, and we're going to change this up a little bit, adding a few points inside here. Alright, so I cover this more in detail in another video, but as you can see, there's my cornering back again. Obviously the options are slightly different, but they're there. You're still able to make a square corner around it. Alright, so let's go back to our cube here, or square. Now, moving along, dealing with the rectangular properties, you can adjust your width and your height, which I haven't played with. So, yeah, it's essentially doing the same thing as up here. So, that, and then you have a rotation for your angles, which again I haven't really played with. I haven't found a need for any of this. But again, at the same time, it's doing very similar things as what you were seeing up here, but manipulating it in a different way. This is treating it more like this tool here when you're rotating, which is obviously not the scale tool, but the rotation tool. So that's what that's treating it. Now we're going to move on to the next group here. As you can see, this is where you have the ability to change what type of corner you're working with. You can concave it, or you can just flatten it out. So, nice. Now, as well as adjusting how big of a curve radius that you're working with. So let's change this to say, I don't know, 0.5. As you can see, all my radiuses are now 0.5 of an inch distance. As we move through here, there's one for each corner, but in the center here you see this little chain. Right now they're connected, so when you change one, they're going to change them all. This doesn't apply for how the corners are affected. Now, if you uncheck that, I can now go in and change one of my corners to, say, 1 inch. I can go back and reconnect that. Now with that, if I recall right, it will retain proportionally your centers, your radiuses proportionally. And I believe that's alright. Alright, now let's move to the next section here. Section here is to allow you to decide what you want to scale with when you're scaling objects. Like sometimes you don't always want that line to be thicker when you scale it up. As you scale it up, you want it to maintain that same thickness as you see in here. So the same thing with your corners. You don't always want your corners to scale up when you scale an object. Now we'll talk about align to pixel grid in a few minutes. That's a little bit different and a little bit harder to explain. So let's go ahead and we'll check scale, stroke, and effects. So now with that, now when I scale this up, you'll see the stroke actually get thicker. Since I have no effects on this cube, it's not going to show you anything. So let's quickly just throw say a drop shadow down. So we'll use the defaults, that's fine, who cares. Alright, so now we have a drop shadow. As long as you have this checked, we'll uncheck. When we scale it down, the effect itself is going to scale with it, along with the cornering, your corners. Now, if I have the corners unchecked, they're going to maintain their current ratio and size. Alright, that gets you all the way up through to align with pixel. Now, this is something a little bit different. Now, what align with pixels does, so we'll check that. Actually, we'll uncheck that and we'll just scale it in here. But before I get on to that, I want to cover one quick little thing. See my little smiley square face here? Now, the interesting thing is that, yes, there's multiple objects. It's not the interesting. It's a group. So if you look here down in your layers, if you see that it's grouped up, so it looks like one object, and I can go down into that group and again select individual components through the layers. And I'm going to set a corner on this guy just for the fun of it. Alright. Now, what we're going to be talking about is pixels. But we're in a vector program, yes, well aware of that. Why would I be concerned about pixels? Well, there's quite a few reasons. This is something that's been in Illustrator for a very long time. And it's actually quite important, especially when you're dealing with images. When you're trying to get images to look right, they need to be a certain size for, say, the web and things like that. If things aren't set appropriately or lined up appropriately, so you're going to get what's called the anti-aliasing. Your edges will look fuzzy and things of that nature. So what you want to try to do a lot of times is make sure, as much as possible, say you have that straight line going from, i.e. right here, like from the top to the bottom of this guy, or from on the flat area on the top here, or any of those. If they're not lined up perfectly to a pixel, when you take that out to, say, export it to a JPEG, for example, you could end up with a fuzzy line, which isn't normally what you want. I mean, sometimes that's what you want, but on average, that's not what you're looking for. So here is what Pixel Perfect is. Pixel Grid, align to Pixel Grid, I'm sorry. It helps you get closer to a pixel perfect layout. So let's go to View, and we want to turn on Pixelview. Oh no! As you can see when we're looking at it, and you can almost see what I'm talking about right here. The anti-aliasing, like in this case with this guy, what I may want to do is scale up this stroke a little bit. So I'm going to go into my group again. So if I double click, it brings me into that group, and I can select that object and increase that stroke, because now I know that isn't what I'm looking for. Now it gives me a better stroke using 2 points. But as you can see, my lines here, it's really fuzzy. So let's select that, and we'll uncheck the preview. Now you see it's a solid line, which is what it really is, because what is a vector is a mathematical point system, based off of points. What's that distance between point A and point B? if there's a curvature, what's that curvature? Don't ask me what the math is. I'm not very good at that stuff. Alright, so let's turn on Pixel Preview again. So now we're looking at those individual pixels. Now see the fuzzy line, and once we click that, it brings everything into alignment. What it's doing is taking that and shifting. It's taking your objects and shifting them to the nearest pixel. So you're getting a perfect line instead of, well, now that I did that, my fuzzy line's gone. But you get the point. Instead of the fuzzy line, you get a perfect pixel line. It literally shifts your object over a pixel, or to the nearest pixel, in both directions, whether it's vertical or horizontal. As you can see, now with that curve, it's got the anti-aliasing. That's what you want, because that's the only way it's not going to look jagged. Alright, and with that, thank you for watching. Thank you for watching, everybody. I hope you all liked it. Please, if you want to see more videos, go ahead and subscribe. If you want to leave a comment, please do so. Thanks again for watching.